Hey everyone, Happy New Year, and we want to say Happy New Year and welcome to the very first Radiotopia Presents of 2024. It's a series that we are truly excited about. It's called Shocking, Heartbreaking, Transformative. Now, this is from documentarian Jess Shane, who put out an open call on Craigslist and then worked with 4 strangers to explore the standard rules that documentarians and journalists use to tell their subject stories. So the series gets into all sorts of questions about what happens when people's real lives are collected, edited, and consumed. The show pulls back the curtain on what goes on behind the scenes of your favorite nonfiction shows. And then it turns in on itself and some really interesting twists and turns along the way in the making of the show. I've gotten to know Jess a little bit over the making of this show. Every time I chat with her, there's a new wrinkle to this story. It is really incredible. So go check out the new Radiotopia Presents series, Shocking, Heartbreaking, Transformative. It is out now on your favorite podcast platform. Hello and welcome to This Day in Esoteric Political History from Radiotopia. My name is Jody Avirgan. This day, August 12th, 1892, actually August 11th, 1892, a woman by the name of Lizzie Borden is arrested for the murder of her father, Andrew, and stepmother, Abby, in Fall River, Massachusetts. A week earlier, the murders had rocked the small, high society town. I will read you one of the headlines from the day after. Quote, "Shocking crime. A venerable citizen and his aged wife hacked to pieces in their home." Shocking crime, gruesome crime. And the headlines and the fascination with the trial did not stop there. Borden's trial, where she was eventually found not guilty, I will say, it's covered breathlessly. And then in the years and decades, and I guess centuries since, people are still fascinated by the Lizzie Borden story. So that's what elevates it from just, a gruesome murder to something that maybe teaches us something about journalism and our fascination and obsession with true crime over the years. And obviously, we're a podcast. We might be the only not true crime podcast in the world. I haven't checked. But, we will dip our toe and talk a little bit about why this stuff is so fascinating. Here to do it, as always, are Nicole Hammer of Columbia and Kellie Carter-Jackson of Wellesley. Hello there.
Hello, Jody.
Hey there.
Did I spoil that Lizzie Borden was found not guilty? Because we all realized that we didn't think we really had that in our heds. But yeah, she was found not guilty. We can get to that.
Mm-hmm.
But Kellie.
Yeah.
It seems like the social context into which this event happens is so important. So tell us about Fall River, tell us about the family and kind of what we need to know on that front, and then we'll get into the case itself.
Sure. So Fall River is about 30, 40 minutes outside of Boston, depending on traffic. If you're thinking, though, in 1892, probably a little bit further away, given that they didn't have, massive automobiles and highways. But Andrew Borden is a very wealthy man. He's not just an ordinary citizen. He owns a lot of real estate, a lot of mills, banks, and so all of this wealth that he has, it's interesting because he doesn't live beyond his means. He really doesn't live at his means. And this bothers his daughter greatly. He also is married to a woman by the name of Abby Borden. And the rumor is that Lizzie and Abby did not get along at all. And so there's tension in the household that's based on these personal relationships, but also their economic or socioeconomic setup, I think, feeds into the resentment and the tension that this family has.
I have to say, I don't think the headline writers liked Abby that much either. Venerable citizen and his aged wife. Yeah, is the headline you read for us? It cuts a little deep.
And that certainly becomes part of the story. She is thought of as the evil stepmother, and the public opinion, as we'll track, sort of weirdly tilts towards Lizzie. Fall River, I will say, the other thing I noticed if we're tracking kind of word usage, Fall River is the quintessential town that gets described as leafy. I don't know exactly why. I've used it before, but just it is a town that is described as leafy, and for some reason I think that it gives me exactly the picture I need of it. But the incident, Niki, what do we need to know about what happens on the day that Andrew and Abby are well, I guess hacked to death is the right way to put it.
Yes, the day they are axe murdered. Well, I mean, we know we have a pretty clear timeline of what happened, actually, because it happens in a short window of time when they're alone. So Abby was the first to be killed, and she was struck in the back of the head and then hacked something like 17 times. Like, it was a pretty vicious, brutal murder. And then it's like, I think an hour and a half later when her husband Andrew comes home, and then he is hacked as well. And there are people in the house when this is happening. So the maid is there, though she is supposedly up on the third floor taking a nap, and Lizzie Borden is there. She said, some people say she's in the barn for a while. She comes back. It's unclear where everyone is during this. But the maid says that she hears Lizzie say, "Come, my father's dead." And then the police are called, and they do a kind of shoddy investigation, and it goes from there. She's arrested. The murders happen on the 4th, so she's arrested about a week later.
Yeah. And then we get to the trial, and the trial is, I suppose, not that big of a surprise, a sensation. It's covered breathlessly, not just in the town and not just even in Boston, but it starts to pick up national attention. Describe to us, Kellie, what is it that's appealing about this trial, and what are the narratives that emerge, particularly, as we said, they start to tilt a little bit in Lizzie's favor.
Yeah, so there's so much about this that I think would not happen if the family were not wealthy. This was related to as being the Titanic of its moment, which seems a little suspect to me. But if you think about the exorbitant amount of wealth and how tragedy gets connected to both, people sometimes have an insatiable appetite to want to know what happens to rich people and why. And so Lizzie gets caught up in this. Now, she is supported by her community. The women's temperance group comes to her aid. They protest by her side, saying that she could not have committed this crime. And it really becomes sort of this, well, you can't even say a he said, she said moment, because her father and stepmother can't really say, what happened. So it becomes her story versus everybody else, or versus the evidence of the moment. And so this gets played out in the court of public opinion, not just during the trial. And people are making judgments about whether or not they think she did this or was capable of even doing this.
And so it becomes the gossip of the town, right? We should also say that she wasn't the first or only suspect. I mean, initially, various immigrants in town were targeted. And in fact, I think a few weeks after this, somebody else is axe murdered in town, and they arrest an immigrant for that murder, but they decide that he wasn't in town when the Borden murders happened, and so couldn't have been responsible for those. But there's also Lizzie Borden's uncle. The maid is at times considered a suspect. So there's a lot for people to gossip about. And Lizzie herself, she's a Sunday school teacher, as Kellie was saying. She's part of the Women's Christian Temperance Union. So she's a person of high standing, which I think adds both to her defense, but also the salaciousness of the idea that she might have done this.
And that really does seem to be the defense, such as it was really just kind of painting a picture of her character. She's high society, where at this moment she's a frail woman. And, there's reports that she fainted during the trial, though that might not be true and so forth. But, there doesn't seem to be a mounting of real sort of evidence, quote unquote, to make the case. But nevertheless, that does seem persuasive, not just to the media, but as we've been saying, to the jury. It's a 15-day trial. It is a very quick deliberation by all accounts. I think there's reports that the jury actually basically decided right away that they were going to find her not guilty, and then waited because they were like, it might be bad luck for us to walk right back out and say she's not guilty. But they find her not guilty, and it's sort of on the, we don't really know what happened, but we kind of like this person. Our sympathies sort of are with this person, so let's just let her go. And to that point, there was never another trial. They never find another person. They never sort of try and prosecute someone else. I don't think Lizzie Borden pledged to find the real killers.
She didn't write a book called If I Did It.
No. Yeah, exactly. But, she sort of retires back into high society.
In the same town.
So, in the same town, right. So, obviously, look, I'm trying to breeze through some of these details because I do want to get to this larger question of why this is so fascinating, both in the moment but over the decades. And so, Niki, I don't know if you can sort of paint a picture of your estimation of how you have seen this story continue and maybe change, but just remain in the bloodstream in this really, I think, kind of surprising and fascinating way.
You know, when I was growing up, there was this little ditty that went, Lizzie Borden had an ex. She gave her mother 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41. And that gives you a sense of like, it's pretty
I'm
savage.
That
it's
to
also
my kid for
inaccurate.
Sure.
They're not 40 and 41 whacks. It was a little closer to 20. But also, like, first of all, that's why I thought that she had just been found guilty, because it had been so embedded in just the rhythms of childhood that she was an axe murderer. And so, first of all, that she gets turned into that kind of childhood legend suggests something about the staying power of this story. But it becomes the subject of plays and books and eventually podcasts. And I think because people can project onto it anything they want. Like I was reading about a play or a book that had been written about Lizzie Borden, in which the person suggested that she had been caught in a lesbian affair with the maid. And it's like, there's no evidence for that. But like, why not? Like, you just take all of the different moving pieces of this and you arrange them the way that you want. And you can tell all sorts of salacious and compelling stories about what happened.
It's so interesting to me whenever a major incident becomes a Lifetime movie, like that's when you know you've made it. I feel like that was, Christina Ricci plays her in a movie. There's a ton of recent films, like 2018, that came out about her. But there are also, like, I think of this is an old film with Mike Myers, The So I Married an Axe Murderer or something like that.
Great
but this
film.
idea of like women sort of becoming unhinged and losing it, and those homes being haunted places and all of that becomes a part of the public folklore about ideas that we have about wealth and women and, women of a certain like ilk. I think all of that plays into it.
Yeah. The Borden house is now a museum, and gets thousands of visitors a year, though I think it recently went up for sale for $2 million. You could stay in this house. But yeah, there's been movies throughout the years. I mean, it's almost like, every generation, some rising actress plays Lizzie Borden. It happened in the 30s and the 50s and the 2000s. And it's just amazing. And now, of course, there's like, I think there is the Lizzie Borden podcast. Every true crime podcast has sort of taken a whack, so to speak, at the story, and either done a season or an episode, I guess now including us. But it is just this remarkable ongoing story that I think ties into some just like core American fascinations that haven't gone away. High society, sensationalism, obviously murder, true crime. Those are
it's
like
OJ all over
things.
again.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah.
The same elements are of there. Maybe not of celebrity, but certainly of wealth and high society and all of that. A brutal murder. Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like the story is just like almost at this point a blank slate onto which you can project all sorts of interesting ideas as you tell it. But anyway, let's leave it there. That's a good note to end on. So, Nicole Hemmer, thanks to you as always.
Thank you, Jody.
And Kellie Carter-Jackson, thanks to you.
My pleasure.
This Day in Esoteric Political History is a proud member of Radiotopia from PRX, a network of independent, listener-supported, artist-owned podcasts. Our researcher and producer is Jacob Feldman. Our producer is Brittany Brown. You can get in touch with us with any questions or comments or ideas for the show. Email us thisdaypod@gmail.com, or you can find a form at thisdaypod.com. My name is Jody Avergan. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you soon.
Radiotopia.